Hello, and thank you for tuning in to NikeTV. If you somehow stumbled upon this video and decided to give it a watch, I'm so glad you're here. So real quick, or not real quick, I came up with this concept after resigning from the South Carolina Department of Corrections in July of 2021. It just never seemed like the right time to launch this idea, to kind of give it some airplay. But now here I am, I'm back, I'm trying to be better than ever. But it just occurred to me, you know, in all of my true crime watching, because I am a true crime fanatic. My friends tease me sometimes and tell me they think I'm trying to cook up the perfect murder, but I promise you, I'm not. It's just something so captivating about that genre, and I find myself spending hours on YouTube just going down the rabbit hole of true crime. But while working at the prison, you know, I used to realize that a lot of the crimes that have taken place in South Carolina that we consider high profile here, there's no real information about them out there. And so I felt like I had a unique opportunity here, because not only do I know about these crimes, but I've had the opportunity to speak to some of these people. Well, most of the people that I'm going to be talking about in this series, actually, I have actually had some kind of face-to-face contact with, whether it was when I was a corrections officer or when I became a caseworker and they were on my caseload, what have you. All I know is that I spent a decade working with accused killers, accused rapists, accused child molesters, you name it, I was there. But again, I realized that there's no real content about these people in our neck of the woods. I mean, you got your Jeffrey Dahmers, you got your Ted Bundy, your John Wayne Gacy. You have people like that, the more well-known people who are, you know, all over the internet, all over the TV screens. There's always new documentaries, coming out about them, books, what have you. But South Carolina has some real savages. And I just like to include that not everyone who is accused is always guilty. I mean, the media puts their own spin on stories. If you don't know the facts coming from these people, and even sometimes then you have to take that with a grain of salt. But I'd rather hear it from them than to take what I hear in the media and run with it. And I've heard from a good amount of these people what they have done. You know, for some reason, my office usually became like an impromptu therapy service. And I'm just so thankful that I had that, you know, unique opportunity, because not a lot of people in the true crime world have that, you know, that chance, or can be able to say that, you know, not only am I talking about these people, not only am I narrating their crimes and their life stories and what they've done, but I've actually spoken to these people in person. I've actually gotten to know the person behind the crime, or the accused behind the crime, however you choose to categorize it. I just know that my problem with the true crime community was that usually it's always these well-known cases that are just worldwide, that are just national media, and outside of that. So I felt like, you know, the people here in the great state of South Carolina could use some representation. So that's what I'm here to do. And my goal is to be as respectful as possible. I mean, no disrespect to any of the people that I talk about in these videos. This is just facts that I've gotten from several different sources, as well as from my own personal experiences, and a little bit of my opinion sprinkled in there. But we're going to not try to veer off course too much with that. But without further ado, I present to you this series. I've decided to name this series Death on a Dirt Road. That might be some serious generalization, but if you know anything about the South, you know that we are famous for our dirt roads. And to me, anyway, there are more dirt roads than paved roads, as opposed to the town in New Jersey where I came from, or New Jersey as a whole. You know, there's more concrete than there is dirt, but that's not the case here. So I just thought it was a fitting title. Our very first topic of conversation in this series will be a woman named Brenda Gail Cutro. Now, when I knew Brenda, we call her Gail. I've never heard anyone refer to her as Brenda. So, you know, that kind of threw me off when I did my research. And I realized that her name was actually Brenda, or maybe I knew that and just forgot. But I'm so used to calling her Gail that, you know, that kind of threw me off. But anyway, Gail ran a daycare center out of her home in Irmo, South Carolina. Irmo is about 15 minutes from here, and I live in the capital city of Columbia. And just a quick note, if you see me looking up, that's because that's where my notes are. But anyway, so Gail and her husband, Joseph, or Josh, I've found sources with both names. They ran a home daycare center in Irmo, South Carolina. It was called the Cherokee Hills Daycare Center. It opened in the 1970s, I believe, and these two ran that together. Gail's role at the daycare center would earn her the name of serial baby killer. And that's a little messed up. I mean, I know her. She just comes off as such a sweet lady. I don't know. I wasn't there, but that's just kind of troubling. But anyway, she was dubbed a serial baby killer. And she was charged with assault after a baby in her care suffered permanent brain damage. But that case failed to garner a guilty verdict. So investigators were kind of watching Josh and Gail as they ran this daycare center, but there was nothing that they could do because the evidence didn't show that she actually was the cause of this brain damage. So they kind of kept them on their radar, and she continued to run her daycare center along with her husband. And but that wouldn't be the worst of it. On January 4th, 1993, a woman by the name of Lindy Colson began bringing her son to the Cutros for childcare. And it was right around that time, you know, she dropped him off on that day. And by the afternoon, when she came to pick up her son, she noticed that emergency personnel were arriving also. So, of course, in a tizzy, she pulled up to the house wondering, you know, does this have anything to do with my child? Is it another child in there? You know, she's, of course, as any mother would be, flipping out, only for Josh Cutro to run out of the house and tell her that her son Parker was dead. I mean, can you imagine just going to pick up your child after a long day of work? You know, it's just routine at this time, and the person who was charged with taking care of them just comes out and just casually says, "Oh, he's dead." I probably would have flipped the script. But Parker was taken to the hospital. He was pronounced dead. Because autopsy results were inconclusive for little Parker, his cause of death was ruled as SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. So, in essence, this is the second child that has been critically injured or fatally injured under the Cutros' care. And the part that tore me up was that the mom, she went to a support group for parents of children who passed away with SIDS, or sudden infant death syndrome. And I don't know if it was Gail's request, but she ended up giving some articles of Parker's clothing to Gail when they went to this support group. And she was kind of like, it seemed to me like she was trying to comfort Gail after her son died in her husband's care. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, I was reading it, I was furrowing my brow. If you think I look confused now, when I was reading that, I was like, what? You know, but I commend this woman. You know, I feel like that took great strength and test of character to even be able to interact with these people after the death of her child. But it doesn't end there, folks. So I wish to revise this part of the video and say that it was not Lindy Colson who arrived at the same time of the emergency personnel. It was the next baby. Those facts just kind of ran together for me, but I just wanted to add that little addendum in there and say, but I mean, still everything else was accurate. They tried to revive Parker. He could not be revived. He was pronounced dead, and the rest of the events went as I've stated. Then 8 months later, there was another child left in the care of the Cutros. His name was Ashlyn Daniel, and he died in the care of the Cutros home also. And as baby Ashlyn's mother arrived to pick him up one day, it was her who arrived at the same time of the emergency personnel. And that's when the husband of Gail came out and told her that the baby was dead. So everything else I said back then, it still stands. I can't imagine coming to pick up my child after a long day thinking all is well. You know, we do this every day. And the next thing I know, someone's coming outside like they're telling me the sky is blue and telling me that my child is dead. I mean, Dr. Reynolds testified that petechial hemorrhaging was present during the autopsy of little Ashlyn. So what is a petechial hemorrhage? A petechial hemorrhage is tiny round brown purple spots due to bleeding under the skin. They may be in a small area due to minor trauma or widespread due to a blood clotting disorder. And they can have causes that are not due to underlying disease. Example, bug bites, abrasions, trauma, or even side effects of certain medications. But because the cause of death could not be accurately determined, they also ruled little Ashlyn's death as SIDS. So at this point, you know, Gail is just one by one, she's just rolling off these babies, and investigators are like, they're scratching their heads because they know that there's something not right here. But at the same time, these doctors keep concluding that these babies are dying of SIDS, which essentially ties their hands because it's not impossible, but it's just kind of weird that baby after baby would die of SIDS. You know, you would think after one, you would kind of up your care to know what not to do the next time, but that wasn't the case. So then an incident 10 months later occurred, okay, which made investigators say, you know what, forget it. It's something not right in this house. We got to do something. So for a long time after little Ashlyn's death, Josh nor Gail had any babies in their care for months because, you know, I'm guessing they had to regroup. They had to rethink their strategy. And of course, they probably were trying to figure out exactly what went wrong. I mean, but to me, one of them knew, if not both of them, one of them knew what was happening. But it was safe to assume that, you know, it just wasn't cool right now to have babies in their care after, you know, all of this stuff happened. So then Catherine Meyer, she was the mother of a 4-month-old named Asher Meyer. And she began taking her baby to the daycare. But on June 23rd, 1993, little Asher had to be sent to the hospital. He arrived limp and lethargic and would later be diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome. So here is where the pivotal moment happened. Because this baby was diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome and his symptoms kind of mirrored what they'd seen before, but what had been diagnosed as sudden infant death syndrome, now they had to go and they had to exhume the body of one of the babies to determine if they had missed something before. Little Parker Colson, the first baby to die in the care of the Cutros, his body was exhumed and his cause of death was revised to shaken baby syndrome. They went back, they re-autopsied the body, and they realized that they had, in fact, missed something. And so his cause of death was revised, and Gail was subsequently arrested because at that point, they realized that one baby, maybe, but 3 babies, no, you know, we got an issue here. So prosecutors started believing that Gail was suffering from a condition known as Munchausen by proxy syndrome, or Munchausen syndrome by proxy. It's a mouthful. But in essence, it is a syndrome in which the person in charge of care of another basically makes them sick to get attention for themselves. I don't know if you guys heard of the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She and her boyfriend killed Nick Littlejohn, is that his name? I'm not sure, but they killed her mother because her mother suffered from that disorder, and she would make Gypsy sick, and you know, she would lie about her age. She would do a lot of things that just hurt her child, and her child was almost in perfect health, and the poor thing got tired of it, and they just took her mother out. Oh, Nicholas Godejohn. I'm sorry, I don't know why that came to me, but yeah, I mean that is the essence of what Gail was suffering from: Munchausen syndrome by proxy. In other words, prosecutors believe that these deaths were the result of Gail causing these symptoms to these babies and wanting to look like the hero almost, or wanting to look like, you know, look at me, I'm helping the children, or these children died in my care, I deserve sympathy. Whatever the case, the jig was up. The jig was up. They were through playing with sis, and they arrested her. But she would be tried 3 different times, and she was released on a $300,000 bond, and she had supporters. At that point, she said that she was the victim. She had been the victim all along. I have some news articles here. I will insert them at some point so you guys can pause and kind of take a look at that and judge for yourselves. But she was released, and, you know, they would end up having to try her 3 times because people could not determine whether or not she was actually guilty. And that seems to be like a pattern. You know, they couldn't determine the actual cause of death for the babies, so they just were writing it down as SIDS, you know, until the last baby came along, and that baby had shaken baby syndrome, and he had trauma, and somebody was smart enough to say, no, you know, this is not sudden infant death syndrome. Something is wrong here. You know, there's a pattern. So, I mean, this woman seems to have a pattern, and I hate to talk about her in that sense, but, you know, because that's not the person that I came to know. But you never really know people. And as innocent as she could be, as innocent as she professes to be, if these facts are any sort of true, then I don't know. She would not be arrested until a full 7 years later. And at that point, she was charged with 2 counts of homicide by child abuse. And that is a South Carolina statute. I've never heard that anywhere else. But that's what it's called when a child dies. You know, they call it homicide by child abuse. What happened to her husband, you ask? Oh, Mr. Man was only charged with neglect, which, you know, as far as I know, and as long as I've been working in the prison, I've heard that in South Carolina, the hands of one are the hands of all. I don't understand how they were both operating this daycare center, and only she was charged. I don't know if he turned state's evidence. He was only charged with neglect at the time. Gail kind of she bore the brunt of these charges, and she eventually got a life sentence for the deaths of these babies. And Josh, he went on to be arrested, or Joseph. I don't even know the man's real name at this point, because like I said, in my research, I've noticed that he was called 2 different things. I've never heard Josh as a short form of Joseph, but he went on to be arrested later on drug and weapons charges. And he actually resisted arrest, and he was shot, and he claimed to have been trying to commit suicide by cop. So that's kind of where the story ends as far as her being on the street, as far as her operating that daycare center. Fast forward to Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. That's where I initially met Gail. And like I said, she's a soft-spoken woman. She's very sweet and to herself. I don't know her like the inmates may know her, but in my dealing with her, she was always very respectful, very sweet. Looks like she wouldn't harm a fly. Just a nice woman with kind of salt and pepper hair. And she's the quietest thing, you know. She would work in the library, and she just didn't cause any problems. And that's kind of my issue. I don't want to say, well, maybe not my issue, but that's kind of where my confusion lies. when I was working in the prison, because these people that are accused of such heinous crimes, you talk to them and you interact with them, and you would never ever think that they have been accused of what they've been accused of. And I know, you know, some people know how to lay it on thick. They know how to present a front to the world. I get that. I know all of that. But some people are really convincing in that role, you know, just of who they are. So I could never see Gail as the type of person to kill anybody's babies, you know, just from walking around the grounds of the prison and feeding the cats. And, you know, thank God that she got the help that she needed. And, you know, now this is an issue of mine that I have in South Carolina. You know, people with mental illnesses, they do not get the help that they need. We are not equipped to deal with mentally ill patients in prison formats. They need actual mental institutions, and because there's a lack of that here, you know, they're sent to prison and they're kind of made to fend for themselves, and they're kind of doped up with medications, and they get things like oh gosh, I can't even think of the syndrome that they get from taking so much medicine, but it kind of turns these people into a shell of who they were. It's tardive dyskinesia. That's what it's called. And you know, I've sat in enough treatment teams to know that after you've doped the person up for so long, that person is no longer who they was. And that might work to numb some of those instincts and some of those impulses. But on the other hand, it kind of destroys a person's mental balance so that like they're no longer there. So I can't even say that, you know, I know this woman for who she used to be, but the Gail that I met, I don't know if it's due to medication. I don't know if it's due to, you know, just kind of reflecting and kind of, you know, getting herself to a better place after everything that happened. But I just could not see her being the type of person to do that. But according to all of these sources, she did. And you know, we talked about it, not in detail. She did talk about it a little bit. You know, I remember we talked one time after she went to visitation. Her parents had come to see her and, you know, her son. And she was, you know, telling me what happened, because I told her, like, Gail, you know, straight up, I can't believe that they're saying that you did this. And, you know, she yes, you know, that's what they're saying. But, you know, it wasn't like that. I didn't do it. And, you know, when I say this woman had me as a captive audience, she had me as a captive audience, because you kind of hang on to every word that they say, because it's just really interesting to talk to the actual person who is accused of committing the crime, and knowing that they no longer have anything to lose. So they really don't have to lie. A lot of them still do. And a lot of them like to embellish. A lot of them like to, you know, they like to make it more than what it is. Like a certain somebody named Todd Coleb, a serial killer here in South Carolina, who I had the pleasure or the displeasure of having on my caseload before I left the department as a whole. But that's another story for another day, because when I get into that one, I'm going to get into that one. But, you know, at the risk of rambling, I just like to say that I can see where this series is going to be cathartic for me. It's going to be, because I haven't really gotten the department out of my system, you know, to be there for a decade and to kind of leave, you know, it was my passion to make a difference with these people. But I realized that I can still make a difference by telling their stories. I don't have to be there physically. You know, these are the people who I walked with. You know, I saw these people more than I saw my own family at times, especially when I was in uniform. So, you know, I'm going to take pride in telling these stories, and, you know, not demonizing them, but not victimizing them either. Because, like I said, we weren't there. We don't know the true details, only what has been reported, only what the person has said. But I don't want to vilify anybody anyway. You know, I don't want to vilify anyone. You know, I have great respect for these people, regardless of what they're accused of. I'm not God. I don't have a heaven or hell to put them in, and I cannot be their judge, jury, or executioner. That has already been done. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this case. That was the case of Brenda Gail Cutro, a serial baby killer from South Carolina. I hate that title. I hate that they nicknamed her that, but it is what it is. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you happen to come upon this video, go ahead and smash the like button for me. Let's grow this channel. I feel like you guys are going to love this content. You know, I'm coming with a unique perspective, a unique approach, and it's just not going to be the same thing that you see all the time on this platform. I promise not to cover Jeffrey Dahmer or Ted Bundy or, you know, any of these people. But I would like to say, because I did forget to mention this, that there was a book written about Gail and her crimes, and it's called In Good Hands, and it was written by David Helcher and published in 2016, I believe. So go pick that up. I believe you can get it on Amazon or wherever books are sold. But, you know, if you're interested in looking further into this case, because I did give you the Campbell Soup version, but I mean, all the facts, they're in there. But I know that here in South Carolina, inmates are prohibited from profiting off of their crimes. It's something called the Son of Sam laws. And, but there's nothing that says other people can't, you know. So go ahead and check out that book. Continue to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you. I'll see you in the next one.